A distressed father pleads for his son to come home as hundreds of British Muslims head to Syria to join terror groups considered too extreme even for Al-Qaeda.
I miss him a lot.
The executions of British and US hostages send shockwaves through Western governments. In an exclusive interview, the Imam of Portsmouth Mosque tells us,
"What happens in Syria is not a jihad, it's a civil war."
And we go undercover to speak to British fighters claiming to be in Syria. You can look for a husband before you come online here and marry on Skype. As UK authorities threaten to crack down on its citizens fighting abroad, we ask, why are young British Muslims joining these groups?
ISIL is a greater and deeper threat to our security than we have known before.
عن طريق الحياة فإن المجاهد يعبر إلى الحياة عن طريق الموت.
Experts say around 500 British nationals are currently fighting on the front lines of Syria. With Scotland Yard claiming that 200 Britons have already returned to the UK, authorities now fear the threat of a potential blowback.
He would never pose a threat to this country. He wouldn't pose a threat. He's not that ignorant. He might be naive, but he's not ignorant.
Like his son, several other British Muslims as young as 16 have travelled from various cities across the UK to join militant groups such as Jabhat al-Nusra and ISIL.
He was a high achiever. He was very friendly. He was very well educated. He was a good sportsman. He was a homely boy. He was never this type of jihadi perception that you have of people in Syria.
The likes of ISIL have become notorious for their use of extreme violence and frequent beheadings of not just foreign journalists but Syrian soldiers and Shia Muslims. So why would a high achiever with a bright future ahead of him leave that behind for a conflict area overrun by groups such as this?
I felt myself that this wasn't a jihad or a holy war. He didn't really consult me. I think pretty much it was a rash decision. But I can see his point of view. There is so much suffering going on and he is only human. And he's feeling for the people there. So that I can see, and I'm fully in support of him helping the humane side and doing the humanitarian side, but not the other bit, that the jihadi side. That's what I object to.
However noble the intentions of these young men and women may be, the devastating effects their departure has had on those left behind is clear to see.
First 3 months I was crying.
I miss him. I miss him a lot. Sorry. Hasn't been easy.
If you could say anything to him now, what would you say?
To come back. Come back.
Many of these young men and women have used Turkey's porous borders as a gateway to Syria, boarding flights on the pretense of going on holiday. Is it their own decision to go, or is there a Pied Piper calling the tune?
Do you think it was his own decision to go, or was he under influence?
He was under the influence, and it was Anjem Choudhury he was hanging around with at the time. Anjem Choudhury had a lot of influence over my family whilst I was absent, and he even drove my son around to some of the events. He got into the wrong company and with their teachings was influenced by what they said, and that became his cause.
Activists like Sheikh Faisal.
A number of other individuals have also linked Anjem Choudhury to those now fighting abroad, but the Salafist preacher who once served as the chairman of the proscribed group Islam for UK denies these claims.
If I believed it was better to go abroad, I would be abroad, long time ago. I believe that I can do my role here, and obviously the people who are willing to sacrifice more than their wealth and their own security in the West, obviously they will get extra reward, but I'm not sending people abroad. And I think that the people who are abroad, if you ask them, I don't think any of them will say, yeah, Mr. Choudhury asked me to come here.
Hanif Kadir, a former Taliban fighter and the co-founder of the Active Change Foundation, an organisation tackling radicalisation, believes individuals operating within local communities may be aiding young people to get to Syria.
There's no mosque in this country that radicalises our young men and women. But there are individuals that, frequent these mosques. There are individuals that operate in our street environments using, social media. And if you're going to be ending up in Syria, somebody is helping you get there. Now, that somebody, or those somebodies, are operating in our communities. Who are they? These are the dark shadows that we always talk about, the shapeshifters that we talk about. We've got to be suspicious about many people that, live in our communities.
ISIL has become the group of choice for many foreign fighters. Its savvy use of the internet and its highly sophisticated recruitment strategies are said to have played a major part in this. In addition to its slick production videos, promotional magazines, its members are often very active across social media.
Through Twitter, through Facebook, all these sort of things, because they sort of glamorise this concept of going out there and fighting, and you're getting a lot of young women coming from this country, so that you're going to get a wife as well. And it's sort of, as well as it's sickening, I could understand from the point of view of a young person living in East London or living in bad conditions in London. They would want that.
Rayatul Tawheed is a mouthpiece for British fighters from London. Using Facebook, Twitter and YouTube, they encourage other British citizens to join the war.
They're showing, you think we're living like soldiers out here, but we're wearing Rolex watches and everything. They're showing them in hotels. So it's all like I want to be part of that. It seems so great. It doesn't seem as bad as it is.
We were able to make contact with a dozen fighters with relative ease, nearly all of whom claimed to be from Britain. As many refused our request for a Skype interview, we were forced to go undercover and speak to them on the pretense of wanting to join them in Syria. A lot of those on social media tend to use pseudonyms and often post pictures of themselves with their weapons, of dead fighters and gruesome images of their victims. Now, off late, tweets have incited violence towards Western authorities and Shia Muslims. Would-be recruits are also offered advice on things such as marriage and travel plans. We asked one fighter what life was like for him over there. He said, "The brothers that have worked in the city, it's very easy, modern and good life, even though it's a war-torn country. There's less fitna and it feels like an Islamic state. But obviously there's hard times for brothers who fight in Ribat, etc. Everyone has a role, fighting and no fighting, as we're trying to build a khilafah and not just fight." The concept of brotherhood is promoted heavily online amongst these groups, but just how genuine is it? Hanif told us about his experience with the Taliban.
When I got there, I was looking forward to be part of this network of brothers that are fighting a just cause, helping the innocent women and children, fighting the enemy, fighting the hostiles that are killing innocent women and children. But when I got there, to be quite frank, it was total hypocrisy. I was being lied to from the moment of entry up until the moment I left. There was this network of pious Muslim brothers. It wasn't like that. It was hypocrisy, it was double standards. An Arab is more superior than a Pakistani and a Bengali or a Somali. And it's a very, very violent environment. I understood that from the beginning. That's what it would be. You don't want to be going in amongst a network of brothers that you're going to go and fight an enemy when they're fighting each other. So the people that I went, they had no regard for my life, and then they had no regard for any other's life, except their own and their own objectives.
What stops me from falling into that trap is understanding the basics of my religion, and I know which scholars are good and which scholars are bad. Chopping someone's head off and putting it on social media, that's not being chivalrous. That's not being a soldier. So that just puts me off completely. I know and understand my religion, and I know through being raised up with good people that it's completely wrong.
ISIL established a so-called caliphate in June of this year, declaring Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi as its leader. How has this group managed to grow so rapidly?
A lot of heinous crimes have been committed instead of beheading people, pushing people forward, and fighting with some of the national Syrians who were opposing the Assad government. So there's been quite a big shift, and that is depending on because they've got more arms and supplies from some of our friends in terms of Saudi Arabia. America was openly trying to do that. Turkey was involved in that to an extent. Also Qatar has been involved in that. We ourselves have been involved in that in terms of saying that we're going to supply communication equipment. And I think we also wanted to supply arms, to be honest.
It's not just young men who've been lured into a so-called jihad abroad. A number of young women have also headed to the war-torn country.
A lot of women that have gone over or have got an appetite to go over, it's simply, I mean, it's very attractive for them because they've been offered husbands. They've been offered a role to play in helping the injured mujahideen, and their role is secure in Jannah if they do that. There's another, it's very attractive to the women as well as it is to the men.
Within days of making contact with two young people claiming to be British citizens in Syria, I was asked if I was interested in getting married to a fighter. Both individuals volunteered to find me a husband and explained how this marriage would be conducted. One of them said, "You can look for a husband before you come online here and marry on Skype, or you can agree to marry him and wait till you get to Sham to marry. I know brothers looking to get married. I can get you in contact with them, inshallah."
The young man advised me that though it's better to get married, single women are still welcome to stay within the so-called caliphate. He told me, "So you stay together. You can occasionally go out for needs and internet. If there's a speciality you have, you can help the state. Of course within the Sharia laws and no free mixing. Also you have a married mujahid who will be your emir and act as a wali for you if you have no mahram or husband here." He then went on to say, for example, you talk through his wife about what you want to need and he takes you guys out with his wife for shopping, etc. The executions of British and US hostages allegedly carried out by a British fighter sent shockwave through Western governments, forcing leaders to announce measures that will tackle this growing problem.
Let me turn to how we address the terrorist threat at home. We have already taken a wide range of measures, including stopping suspects from travelling to the region by seizing passports, barring foreign nationals from re-entering the United Kingdom, legislating so that we can prosecute people for all terrorist activity, even where that activity takes place overseas, and bringing forward emergency legislation, for instance, to safeguard our use of communications data.
Though threats of attacks on the UK have been made by some British fighters online, one fighter we spoke to said they didn't have any intentions to come back. He said, "Yes, none will, even though we say we will, it's all talk, just to get them scared." So just how real is this threat?
Increased the threat level in the United Kingdom from substantial to severe. I
think it's very real. And I say that sadly because I know a lot of young men and women out there and want to go out there to help alleviate their suffering. They want to do some humanitarian work. They want to do something good. I celebrate. I want people to celebrate that. That, you know, we've brought our children up. We've got young men and women here that are very impressionable, very passionate and very emotional. But sadly, when they're over there, they're exposed to environments that they can't control, and the blowback is very real.
In addition to seizing passports, airlines will be forced to hand over more information about passengers travelling to and from conflict zones. But Labour MP Khalid Mahmood is critical of the Prime Minister's plans.
I'm not happy today with the Prime Minister's statement when he says that he will do this and he will take passports off people and do that, when he can't do the basics of manning the passport officers at airports. Making these sort of statements, I think, doesn't serve the purpose of saying that I want to protect the people, when blatantly you're not able to do that. You're not able to stop people that are going out.
Suspected terrorists will also be required to undergo de-radicalisation programmes, 2 of which are already in place by the government: Prevent and Channel. The effectiveness of both programmes is a contentious issue.
Channel and Prevent programme has shown to be a complete and utter failure. It's just another excuse to actually sort of create more and more surveillance at a grassroots levels. And we have, it seems, a template for a real Stasi state. But as we've seen, I mean, if we accept the figures that are given to us by the security services, they failed with 500 people who've still gone over.
Some of these courses by Dr. Sharkawi, the head of those who sit on the Prevent strategy for those coming out of prison, they would say to you simply, just say you came to these classes, sign the piece of paper, then you're off, and I would say you de-radicalize. I'm a certified de-radicalized individual. I believe Islam should conquer all over the world and live by Islamic law and order. I believe democracy is an evil way of life, an oppressive way of life.
But not all oppose these programs.
There's thousands of critics out there that don't like Prevent. Maybe Prevent hasn't worked for them in their areas. Or they don't like Channel because they think it's a spying tool. Let me tell you one thing which I can say hand on heart as a Muslim. Alhamdulillah, with Prevent and Channel, we have managed to help young men and women over the last 10 years to come out of a excluded net, come out of a exclusion zone, an environment where the ultimate would have been destruction for themselves or others, to come back in to get jobs, to come back to their parents, to come back into education, to come back into mainstream, to be decent human beings and practicing Muslims once again.
I think it needs to think through a lot of the measures that's already got. I hope they don't just fly for the new legislation, which they keep talking about. There is a lot of existing legislation that's already in place that we can deal with a lot of these issues. But I think what we need to do is to concentrate on the security side as far as the government's concerned. And I think the community needs to concentrate on how it can also be seen to be delivered effectively, what the real issues are for the community.
To date, 6 people have been convicted of terror offences, and a further 11 are awaiting a trial according to the Crown Prosecution Services. The first to be convicted was 31-year-old father of 2, Mashuda Chowdhury. How difficult is it to prove that someone has committed a crime in Syria?
Well, that's a very good question, because there are a number of things that could be looked at from an English law point of view when somebody is gone to Syria. So kind of things they'll be looking at is if somebody's seen at a training camp, for example, training for jihad. That's illegal under English law. That can be established by simply having seen somebody doing some sit-ups. It's very, very simple to do that. The other things to look at, for example, is somebody glorifying terrorism or disseminating that information. So any activities of a particular prescribed group, if they're sharing that on YouTube or on Facebook, on social media, that could technically fall foul of the Glorification Act. So another piece of legislation one has to be careful about. And of course, the one main one is if you're sending funds over, if the group you send the funds to happens to be a prescribed group, then you could be accused of funding terrorism.
Fighters have been going over to Syria since early as 2011. So why have the authorities been so slow to act?
We haven't had a handle on the whole situation in Syria, and therefore people thought that it was okay because the government was seen by and large to be supporting the freedom fighters to carry on with that. There was mixed signals that very much so that was sent by the government in relation to what was going on in Syria.
According to terrorism experts, the death toll of British jihadis currently stands at 19. The most recent killing is that of 25-year-old Mohammed Hamidur Rahman from Portsmouth. He isn't the only casualty from this coastal town. Last year, 23-year-old Iftikhar Jaman was also killed in Syria. We travelled to their hometown to see if we could get any more information.
Initially, a number of the families had agreed to speak to us, but given recent events in the news, many backed out. There's a real climate of fear here amongst the Muslim community. Now, we've just tried to approach one of the families again, but they're not willing to speak.
We went to the home of Hamidul Rahman. However, the gentleman who came out of the property, who we believe to be the father, denied this was the correct address, though we were told otherwise.
You got the wrong family. Okay. We share the same name, that's the trouble. Oh. You or maybe all media probably got it off the electoral register. Oh. Apparently I was told it's same age as myself as well. Similarities, yeah.
Iftikhar Jaman was the first of the boys to leave, and many say he was instrumental in getting others to join the fight.
And behind me is a stall for the Portsmouth Dawah team, where some of the boys, including Iftikhar Jaman and Mehdi Hassan, volunteered. I'm going to go over there to see if anyone is willing to speak to us.
Nobody wanted to be interviewed, but we did speak to the head of the stall on the phone.
Okay, let me make that clear as well. Sister.
Yeah.
Say that the boys were seen in the Dawah table 1 or 2 times. They were not a member of the Dawah table. They came to an event that everyone was allowed to come, the member of the community, to do Dawah 2-3 days.
The boys, who jokingly refer to themselves as the Britannia Brigade Bangladeshi Bad Boys, frequently visited the Jami Mosque. I've come here to meet the Imam to see how recent events have impacted the local Muslim community.
We tried our best to deal with this, and several times I discussed it in my Friday sermon. I addressed the issue and I explained it, the key concept of jihad and the related issues, and also we had talks.
Fingers have been pointed towards the families and local communities, questioning whether they could have done more.
When mothers and fathers and community members see what's going on in Syria right now with ISIS and the way that they are being very barbaric and brutal, it's their jobs, it's our jobs as elders and sort of parents to warn our children, to warn our young people. It's the jobs of the imams in the masjids.
There is no room for real education of young children, particularly in the predominant mosques, which are predominantly from the Sunni community. I've seen some very good Shia mosques, but I think still more work needs to be done there as well. But I think in terms of the Sunni mosques, it's just no real concerted platform to work on. And the Wahhabi mosques are totally out of touch with anybody.
Well, the boys who went there, they used to come in prayer, and I know their parents, and I know them very well. When they left a letter in their home, and then parents know they left for Syria. The parents, they went to the police. They contacted the police, and then police came to our mosque.
The message from the Imam here is very clear.
What happens in Syria is not a jihad, it's a civil war to seize the power. And the innocent people are the victim. This is not jihad. So who went there are in fact fueling the civil war.
It's been reported that some fighters from the UK have become disillusioned with events in Syria and wish to return home. But is there a safe passage in place for such individuals?
The situation is thus that there is no way back for them at the moment. Because there's no way back for them, they remain vulnerable, they remain exposed to the narrative and the ideology of the Takfiri Khawarijis like ISIS and Jabhat al-Nusra. I would recommend strongly that the government allows them to come back, allows them to go through an intervention, some kind of process to help them, come back in the mainstream. But if we don't, and they're allowed to remain, and they are locked out there, it's only a matter of time before they become indoctrinated to an extent where they have become so angry against their own country, Britain, for not allowing them to come back, that it only takes a matter of time before they become radicalized to an extent that they don't want to fight Assad. They don't want to fight Shia or anybody else. They want to come back and attack the country that's not allowing them to come back because they made a mistake.
Well, this is what I'm trying to figure out what I can do in my position. Because if he comes back, he could get arrested and thrown into jail, and he probably won't take to that idea. And if he stays there, there is a likelihood that he can become a casualty. So this is something that I'd like to find an answer to. What is a person in my position supposed to do?